So I will just say real quickly, this is really not a whole lot to do with the research side of things that I do, but I do always like to just announce that I'm funded originally on a T32 at Stanford University, but most recently on a KO1 in March. And so I'm going to take just a minute and talk about my journey through higher education, because I think the context of that journey will be really important for some of the information that I get into a little bit later. Before I talk about that context, I want to tell you about 8-year-old Noel Vest. So 8-year-old Noel Vest was an incredibly bright student. I was in the 3rd grade. I finished my times tables. I was the first one to finish my timetables in one day. I was an incredibly motivated student, and my teachers definitely paid attention to that. So they had me test into the gifted program. And 2 weeks later, I took the test. 2 weeks after that, I got the results. I did not get into the gifted program. I did not take school seriously. I lived up to that expectation that I was not one of the smart kids. I lived up to that expectation for the next 25 years of my life, and I didn't take school again seriously until 25 years later. And so in between, in that 25 years, from the age of 17 until the age of 31, I was a severe methamphetamine addict, which ended up in resulting in a 7-year prison sentence. And so I was introduced, I say that I was introduced to higher education really through the Community College of Southern Nevada. They had a college and prison program. I consider myself extremely lucky to have been at a prison that got some state-level funding to do a college and prison program. I still have all 7 credits, or all 7 classes. The credits that I earned in those classes are the ones that I am absolutely most proud of today. They are on my transcript, and it really was so important for me because it helped to kind of lay this foundation that I was able to take when I got out of prison. I was able to lay the foundation of some really good study habits, because your life in prison is very regimented. You get up, you do things at the same time every day, and so I was able to take advantage of that, or use that to my advantage to really set in stone some really good study habits while I was in these classes. And so the other thing that happened while I was in prison was that I was also at a prison that had some good, really decent self-help group meetings, and so it was there that I was able to kind of do some self-reflection, kind of about my life, how I had kind of gotten to this point, and made some decisions about how I was going to try and live once I got out. And so that began in 2009. I was released. I got out, and I went to Columbia Basin College. Showed up the very first day I got out, showed up at the school. I told my dad, drop me off, don't come back until I've gotten myself enrolled in school. Got myself enrolled in school. At that time, my only goal was that I wanted to be a drug and alcohol counselor. That was it. I knew I wanted to be a drug and alcohol counselor. It was one of the only career paths that I had heard of in prison where it was a little bit forgiving, that you might be able to get a job, have some kind of career, and I can guarantee you that most people coming out of prison, that's their main concern, right? How can I fund the rest of my life? How can I, pay my bills? How can I do some of these things? What is a possible career? These hands had never worked never a day of construction in their life, and so I didn't have those skills, some of the other skills that I had heard that you could have a career, and so this is the only one that I could come up with. Maybe I could become a substance use disorder counselor. I did end up becoming a substance use disorder counselor. I worked at a place called Somerset Counseling Center in Richland. I worked there for about 5 years. I became very it wasn't for me. I realized really quickly, at least at this particular treatment facility that I was working at, that it was just really an extension of the criminal justice system, and it just didn't fit. You also, I think, there's a certain person that is good at becoming a counselor, and they have these core competencies in motivational interviewing, and I sucked at motivational interviewing. And so, luckily at the same time that I was realizing these things, I was also introduced to some other things that would really change the trajectory of my life. And so some people at the community college said, hey, why don't you think about going to the 4-year university? Why don't you think about getting your bachelor's degree? It's not going to hurt. And so I listened to these people, and so I enrolled at Washington State University, which was the local satellite campus of one of the main campuses that we had back in the state of Washington. And so I went on to get my bachelor's degree at Washington State University, but something magical happened in that transformation, right? That transformation that you see happen to pretty much everyone in higher education, but there's this transformation, especially for people that are formerly incarcerated, and I was introduced to the wonderful world, to me, the wonderful world of statistical modeling and research and science and empirical evidence. And I was really kind of hooked from day one. It just really matched how my brain worked. And so I became really enthralled and got involved in some research that was going on, got introduced to my mentor, Dr. Sarah Trigresser, who really kind of took me under her wing and said, if you are ever interested in going to graduate school, this is what you're going to need to do, this, and this, and all of these steps. And so I kind of worked through those steps with her and had this harebrained idea that maybe I'll apply to graduate school. And so I applied to 7 different PhD programs. I got denied from all of them, except for one. I got accepted at Washington State University, this time at the mothership campus, the larger campus, the Pullman campus, and I got accepted to the PhD program at Washington State University. And so for the next 5 years, I got my PhD. While I was there, I also started a collegiate recovery program called Cougs for Recovery, which is still in existence today. Graduated with my PhD in 2019 and started looking for postdoc positions. Reached out to basically all the people that I had cited in all of my work at WSU in graduate school. All those people, those are the people I reached out to that I wanted to work for as a postdoc. And one of the people that I cited time after time after time after time because of his work in researching self-help groups was a gentleman named Keith Humphreys. And I reached out to Stanford Medicine and was very, very lucky to get an interview with Stanford Medicine and Dr. Humphreys and Dr. Mackey. And they became my mentors at Stanford Medicine. And it has been, the last 3 years have just been this incredible journey to finish this postdoc, and then most recently I've started an instructor position in the Department of Psychiatry, and then I've also started or helped co-found a recovery program at Stanford as well called Cardinal Recovery. And so where I go, collegiate recovery follows, it seems like. So anyways, I wanted to give that as kind of a backdrop to some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here in just a second. And so I'm going to not spend very much time talking about my research program. It's really not too, it doesn't matter too much to what I'm going to present today. But someone gave me some really good advice early on in my career. They said, you don't want to ever, research just one thing, right? You don't want to be the collegiate recovery guy, or you don't want to be the statistical methods guy. You don't want to be the addiction science guy. You want to really kind of diversify what you research because seasons change, winds change, and what's popular one moment may not be popular the next moment. And you don't want to have invested all of your research capital into something that may go out of vogue for funding agencies or for the agencies that fund this kind of research. And so I really have three areas that I research. So one of them is the kind of the overlap of mental health disorders and substance use disorder. I spent a lot of my graduate school doing that. And then another area of research that I have is this. Toward the end of graduate school, I took a class on cluster modeling. It really changed my life. It's allowed me to be incredibly it's allowed me to publish a lot of publications in the last 4 or 5 years because I understand kind of this modeling technique that is really important when you start thinking about that overlap of mental health and substance use disorder. And then most recently, I've also become interested in collegiate recovery programs. The K Award that I have is actually an implementation science K Award to study collegiate recovery programs for the next 5 years. This is kind of an offshoot of that work. So this is basically an offshoot of some of the work that I've done around collegiate recovery, what I'm going to present today. All right, I'm going to start off just by kind of laying the foundation. This is just some basic kind of knowledge for us all to be on the level playing field, and so that we're all kind of understanding the same thing. I'm reading this book recently by a gentleman at Columbia University. His name's Carl Fisher. And it's really great. It's The Urge. You should read it if you're into learning about any kind of recovery or substance use disorder. It's just a really interesting book. And so he talks about the way that our society has approached addiction, and it resonated really well for me because I have tons of friends in recovery. I have tons of friends that I highly respect, and I have friends that say, syringe exchange program absolutely saved my life. I have friends that say methadone absolutely saved my life. I have friends that say 12-step absolutely saved my life. I have friends that say therapy absolutely saved my life. And then I have friends that say prison absolutely saved my life. And you'd think that none of these, there's no way all of these things could possibly be true, but they are. All of these things are true in this world that we live in. The reason that I bring that up is because we live in such a polarized society and the addiction landscape that you would think that there's no way these could be true, but they're all true, and it's our personal experience that really shapes not only our experiences, but it shapes our biases as well. And so for me, the goal, everyone talks about defining addiction, but really the goal here should be to minimize harm and help people live with and beyond their suffering. And so in other words, it's all recovery. To me. And so I want to kind of just start off there, but I just want to kind of lay that foundation before I get started. I also want to talk for a couple of slides just about collegiate recovery in general. I have a good feeling that a lot of people in here understand what collegiate recovery is and kind of what it does. But again, I just want to kind of lay the foundation as far as kind of how I see it. And so when we talk about collegiate recovery, it's important to kind of understand, obviously, it falls in this continuum of care of substance use disorder. I think Dr. Odenkirk did a great job yesterday of kind of talking about how we fund treatment and research around addiction recovery or addiction in general, or really any disease, right? We have, with any disease, cancer, addiction, doesn't matter what it is, there are generally 3 buckets of money, right? So there's prevention bucket of money, there's where a lot of the money gets spent, the treatment bucket of money, and then there's the recovery. And again, that's true for any disease. Right now we're talking about substance use disorder. And so I think that a lot of times when we're talking about collegiate recovery, most of the services, most of the things that they do fall down on this end of the continuum. But not everything that they do, but a lot of what they do fall into this end of the substance use disorder continuum of care. And so Dr. Odenkirk actually got me thinking yesterday, right? She got me thinking about a point that she brought up, and so I wanted to expand just a little bit on it and just give you all a taste of kind of what we're up against here. And so she talked about these 3 buckets of money as they kind of apply. And so I thought, you know what, this is a really great thing I can do. I can go on Google Scholar right now. I can look up how much research is out there. It'll kind of give you a proxy for how much money is being spent in each of these areas. And so this is an experiment that we could all do, right? You could all open your computer right now if you wanted to do it. It's something we could all do. We could put these terms into the search engine on Google Scholar. We just put substance use disorder, college students, and you put one of 3 things in there, right? So in the blank, you put one of 3 things, either prevention, treatment, or recovery. And we'll see what comes up. And this is what I found this morning. So in treatment, as we would expect, a lot of money goes there, 2.74 million different studies or different manuscripts on collegiate or college student substance use treatment. Then we put in prevention, see what comes up. A little bit less, right? This goes about with what she was saying yesterday, is that generally it's about 20% gets spent on prevention. The rest of it goes to treatment. And then we put in the word recovery and substance use college students, and this is what returns. And so, could you imagine if this were any other disease? If this were cancer, if this were diabetes, and you put the words college student or college age, you could imagine that this would, people would be through the roof that this is all that is being spent to research this. And so this is, again, it's part of a larger problem where, for some reason, with this particular disease, there is so much discrimination, there is so much stigmatization that the funding just isn't coming through for research in this area. And so, again, and I ask people to kind of, keep an eye on this. This is something, again, that you can do very, very easily to see if this changes over the next few years. So when we talk about collegiate recovery, this is by all means not fully encompassing. But these are a lot of the services that you'll often see with collegiate recovery programs. A lot of them, everyone that I've been involved with has started out as a student group of people wanting to get together as an all-recovery group and just kind of talk about their recovery experiences within the collegiate setting, because it is different, right? It's just different. And so, the groups that I've been in have really focused, I would say almost more so on the collegiate experience than they do on the recovery, but really, kind of honing in on that collegiate experience, and then it kind of expands from there. And these are a lot of times some of the services that you'll see in collegiate recovery. This, again, I'm sure people are very aware of when we talk about kind of background about collegiate recovery programs. We know that substance use is a major public health problem, and it probably represents one of the most prevalent reasons for dropout on college campus. But really, when, again, you look at the context of the university, little support exists for students wishing to either sustain or enter into substance use disorder recovery. Therefore, if we prioritize recovery services, it may reduce the burden that these students face, and it can help to destigmatize individuals with substance use disorder. And so, again, when I think about collegiate recovery programs, I kind of define it, if you can define it, if you need to define it as, organized programming to support students in addiction recovery. Really quickly, as far as the history of collegiate recovery programs, they've expanded in kind of 3 phases, right? So before the year 2000, you really had 3 programs. You had Texas Tech, Augsburg, and Rutgers University. That was it as far as collegiate recovery programs. And then in 2005, Kitty Harris wrote the collegiate recovery curriculum, which was basically just a curriculum based on the program at Texas Tech University. her and Mandy Baker released that curriculum in 2005. It seems like every collegiate recovery program that I go to, they've got that dusty little thing sitting on their shelf, and there's still a lot of programs that use that collegiate recovery curriculum, even though it was written almost, over 15 years ago now. But that ended up expanding collegiate recovery programs even further, and so from 2000-ish to 2013, you had an expansion of 3 programs to 29 programs. And then in 2014, you had like the third wave of expansion, the Transforming Youth, or back then it was called the Stacey Mathewson Foundation. They created a seed grant program where they were basically giving $10,000 to any school that wanted to start a collegiate recovery program. You saw this huge influx of collegiate recovery programs to what we see today, which is well over, and this is just if you're looking at the dues-paying members of the Association for Recovery in Higher Education, which is about 148 programs across the country. And so it's kind of gone in those 3 phases. Okay, so I want to take a minute and talk about mass incarceration. I think we're really lucky in that this particular presentation has followed a couple of the other presentations that laid a lot of the groundwork and probably did a much better job than this will in kind of defining the problem. So the first question I have, and you can just yell out, does anyone know what this is? Anyone ever seen this? Any chemistry majors? So this is what is known as a buckyball. And I had never heard of this ever in my life. But this is, according to according to chemistry, this is one of the atoms that has the strongest bond, right? There's 60 carbon atoms or something like that, and it has the strong, it is basically unbreakable. And so when we think about mass incarceration, we have to think of it as, as has been mentioned, this is a system-level problem, right? There are so many things that go into this system-level problem. So when we have, you can think of each one of these connections as policies like the school-to-prison pipeline, right? So the huge increase of police officers, resource officers in high schools across the country. Collateral consequences of any kind, right? So criminal history boxes is just one collateral consequence. Criminal history box on housing applications, on employment applications, on school applications, on professional licensing applications, parole, right? The wonderful world of technical violations where a person can recidivate without even committing any kind of new crime. Policies like stop and frisk, redlining, which was brought up earlier, and prison gerrymandering is another connection here. 3 strikes laws, mandatory minimum laws. Mr. Taylor yesterday and Dr. Vicent today talked about how systemic racism is it's baked into every one of these connection points. And so this is not just one policy. It's not like we have one policy that's mass incarceration. It is the culmination of all of these policies and the bonds. It's the bonds themselves that are so tight that you can make you can like weaken one of these connections, but because it's so held tightly close together by people in positions of power, that the system always stays the same. And so when we talk about mass incarceration, we need to really think about it as a system that is in place that is nearly unbreakable because of how it's been created. So again, just getting into some of the basics around mass incarceration, we know that there are way too many people in prison, especially for the population that we have. Both of these come from the Prison Policy Initiative. They just released it. This was brand new, probably about 2 weeks ago. They do a really great job of updating and letting us know how many people are in prison across the country. The one thing that I always like to point out, or there's so much that I would like to point out, but the one thing that I do like to always point out is that just look at the state prisons, right? Look at how many people, look at the proportion that are in state prisons. One thing that always drives me crazy is when we hear these news stories where it's put in our face that, you know, it's the privatized prisons, those are the problem, right? That's, if we just solved privatized prisons, we would fix mass incarceration. Privatized prisons, this is how many in this big whole puzzle, this is how many are privatized, right? You're talking about less than 8% of the prison population, right? And so this is a tactic. I call it propaganda. Other people call it, you know, whatever. But these are some of the techniques that are used to really divert our attention from the real problem. Prisons are a billion-dollar industry, and it is the state that is making all the money off of this. It is a state system, and simply doing away with privatized prisons will do nothing to solve mass incarceration. But sometimes it's presented to us, and again, I think that they should absolutely get rid of they should get rid of all prisons. But you know, it's this. They have this way. The media has this way of presenting these problems as, you know, this is what will fix the problem. And again, make no mistake about this. This is a billion-dollar industry, but it is a diversionary tactic to hide the real problem. And so I always like to kind of finish this slide with really talking about a quote that has always meant so much to me. There's a quote a couple of years ago by a gentleman named Glenn Martin, who at the time ran Just Leadership USA. And what he says is that those closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. So people that have been through the system, people that have been through addiction, those are the ones that are best equipped to help people coming out the other side. He also goes on to say, that's not the only part of the quote, he also goes on to say, but they are furthest from the power and the resources. And so what I'm going to present to you today is, you know, this idea of sometimes college can be the equalizer because it allows for social mobility. It allows people coming out of prison. It allows people with addiction histories to get jobs that they can then have careers with and get into positions of power where they can start making these decisions. And that's one of the reasons that I think that this is what I'm talking about is so important. And so collateral consequences, this is just a snapshot of collateral consequences, right? There are so many collateral consequences. This is just a few of them, right? So access to education, access to housing, access to careers. I wouldn't even just say employment, access to careers that can actually support a family, SNAP benefit, all that. It was all kind of brought up before, but it's important to repeat this. And so, you know, it's for these collateral consequences that increased earnings is incredibly important because they have to overcome all of this. People coming out of prison have to overcome all of this. And then they have to try and provide for their families. And so I'm just going to, again, this is not really a statistics or, you know, I'm not trying to present a whole bunch of findings with this, but I do think that it is important, right? So when we look at the amount of people that have a college degree in the general population, so that's that first little bar right there. So the general public, 66% have no college degree, 34% have a college degree. Well, when you look at it for people that are formerly incarcerated, less than 5% have any kind of college degree, And why this is, again, why this is important is because people that are formerly incarcerated also face the highest unemployment rate. Right? So look at this unemployment rate, 27% for people coming out of prison, formerly incarcerated people coming out of prison. The very highest unemployment rate that America has ever seen in its entirety was way back during the Great Depression, and you had 25% of the general population that was. So nowhere in the history of time have people been less likely to get employment than if you're incarcerated in America. And this is multiplied if you are also in another minoritized group. So when we look at the racial breakdown of this, it's even worse, right? So as a white male, I'm fairly likely to get a job, right? It's only 18.4% for me to go out and get a job. You can see that for other races and other genders, that's definitely not the case, right? Look at black men up there. Almost half are unemployed, people that are formerly incarcerated. I've laid the foundation. I've talked about some important stuff with mass incarceration. Hopefully I'll do a good job of kind of connecting the two and explaining, why this is so important. So can we even think of collegiate recovery as an intervention, right? This is a paradigm shift. We got to really change our mind. We got to really reach if we're thinking that collegiate recovery programs are a criminal justice intervention. That just doesn't make sense. In our minds, it doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to try and make it make sense. All right, this should be no surprise to anybody in here. We know that substance use disorder is a huge public health problem. We know that we want to make our academic institutions more welcoming for people with substance use disorder. I think collegiate recovery programs do a great job of that. But when we look at the level of substance use disorder in the general population, and then again in people that are in the criminal justice system, it's overwhelming, right? So this is the adult general population that suffers from, this is old literature, but you still get the point. They used to call it substance abuse and substance dependence. But this is old literature, but this is the only study still to this day that's been done, that has been peer-reviewed, that has even found the rates of people coming out of prison and the criminal justice system and looked at or tried to evaluate the levels of substance use disorder. And you can see for those coming out of state and federal prisons and jails that the numbers are much higher, right? So 86% have misused, 53% meet clinical criteria for substance, it says abuse disorder, it should say use disorder. It's just that, again, this was old terminology because it was done before 2013. And this is one of the strongest predictors. The only thing that they used, which again, I don't even know that you can consider this a predictor because it's so much more determinant on socio-ecological things, but in this particular study, this Webster study, they found that the only thing that predicted recidivism more than substance use disorder, at least in this particular population, was gang membership. And so you can see that is it ends up being a very strong predictor of recidivism. And I hate to even bring these things up because the way that they measure recidivism is really just a symptom, a lot of times, of substance use disorder, where someone relapses, they get a technical violation for that relapse, and they end up going back to prison for whatever reason that is. So again, even collecting data on this is very, very difficult because it's hard to define what recidivism is, and it's hard to it's hard to get the criminal justice system to let you do this research with the criminal justice system. So I want to take a couple minutes on this slide. I think this is another point that's really, really important. This is, hopefully people have seen this. If not, it doesn't really matter. It's really easy to explain. This is the Sequential Intercept model. It's been around since the early 2000s. It kind of gets rebooted. It's kind of going through a rebooting stage where it's kind of come in vogue again in the research world, where they're trying to kind of depict, okay, so where are people kind of getting into the criminal justice system, and then where are they exiting from the criminal justice system, and envision it is through these intercepts, right? So intercept 0 is just, within the community. This is where we'd hope everybody would just enter and exit, right? Before any kind of criminal justice involvement whatsoever. It doesn't generally happen that way, at least not the way that the American criminal justice system is set up. So generally what you'll see in collegiate recovery programs is you'll see 2 points that people will enter into the criminal justice system. So the first point, and I think that this is the one that I think that collegiate recovery programs are, I'm just going to say, better set up to this particular developmental period, and this particular group of individuals are what you would say are maybe traditional age students, so under 24 years old, get in trouble for the first time, maybe get drug court or diversion, they have to go to treatment, and they come back. And I think that collegiate recovery programs were kind of founded on that coming back from treatment. So not a lot of criminal justice involvement, but maybe a first arrest or something like that. There's a second intercept point, and this is the one that I think has largely been ignored by collegiate recovery programs. It's this one, right? This diversion point number 2. So people like myself that have serious drug or alcohol problems, decide to no, they want to go back to school later in age, later in life, and so they come back to school, and they're just in need of these resources and services that collegiate recovery programs offer. But again, I don't know that our collegiate recovery programs are really set up for them in the way that we are with the diversion point we're more comfortable with. And that's not that's not saying anything bad about collegiate recovery programs. It's just kind of how they got going. But we need to keep in mind that both of these exits from the criminal justice system are diversionary points where with one pathway, which is maybe continued use and not getting a job or not going to school to get a job, is probably returned to the criminal justice system or away from the criminal justice system. So these 2 diversionary points are really kind of important when we think about it. So I'm going to work through this example with you. I'm going to just give you a really small estimate of what this intervention, collegiate recovery programs, could mean or does mean to the criminal justice system. So if you look at the ARHE website, it actually said 144 this morning, but I'm going to use 148 because the math was already in my PowerPoint. So we're going to use 148. So imagine there's 148 collegiate recovery programs across the country, right? There's one here at VCU. There's 147 more across the country. Let's imagine that each of them has 10 students. Very low ball estimation, but let's just imagine that each of those recovery programs has 10 students. So Michael Cleveland in 2007 had this article and basically measured criminal justice involvement by people in a collegiate recovery program. What he found was that there were 65% of individuals in collegiate recovery programs that had some kind of criminal justice involvement, whether it was an arrest or what. So you can imagine there's 65% of those individuals, right? Other studies have come out since then have been somewhat close to that, generally right around. So we're going to use that 65% number. And let's say that we have this national average of 1 year in prison, the cost to house someone in prison and pay all their medical bills and pay all their food and everything is $32,095. Collegiate recovery programs offer desistance. So someone that was maybe going to go back into the criminal justice system or into the criminal justice system away from the criminal justice system. So we're going to save this money over a year. So we do the math, 1,480 students times 65% of those students with criminal justice involvement times $32,095 a year. And what do we come up with? We come up with a savings of over $30 million for the criminal justice system, right? But we'll never get credit for this. If collegiate recovery programs don't start incorporating this into what they're talking about when they talk about the benefits of collegiate recovery, this is saving the criminal justice system in their state millions and millions of dollars, right? But you have to get, and this is where I was talking about, to the positions of power that are so, you have to get in front of the positions of power. You have to make your case to those positions of power. Well, college allows people in collegiate recovery programs to get into those positions of power, right? So it is the great equalizer. And so, I think I did a count the other day. There are, at my university alone, I believe there are, I can't remember exactly what it was, but upwards of 70 lawmakers currently in Washington, D.C. right now have degrees, want some kind of degree from Stanford University, right? And so to get people into those positions of power, college is the equalizer. It's what gets people into those, but they have to get there first, right? They have to be allowed into college. They have to, be able to be supported while they're in college. But those are the individuals that will go on to make these differences. So I'm going to just touch. I've already touched on it a little bit, but I'll touch on why I think this is important. So this is a paper that I wrote, and the reason that I talk a little bit about myself first, I've already talked a lot about myself, but the reason I talk a little bit about myself first is because exactly this. There has been one NIH study, one NIDA-funded study, ever that has looked at collegiate recovery programs, and it was done way back in 2013. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. And it was a small study. It wasn't even one of the big R01s. It was minuscule. It was the little R21 studies, right? And so we need to train people that are going to go out and ask the right questions based on their lived experience, right? I'm just one person, but the idea is that I know how important collegiate recovery programs are. I know that I need to ask these questions. We need more people in the research world to do this, right? And the way to do that is to train them, get them into graduate school, get them into PhD programs. This is another paper that I was very, very lucky to be a part of. And the reason that I bring this one up is because it's so important when we talk about the power of community, right? I have met so many cool people at this conference. I meet a lot of people at cool conferences, a lot of cool people at conferences, right? This is a study that gelled, or this is a paper that gelled out of one of those discussions that I had at a conference a little while ago. I met one of the first authors on this, Kirsten Smith, who is now at the NIH. I met her in this very weird way when we were both at CPDD, and it, like I say, it gelled into this paper 4 years later. And so, this was such a, I don't know, I don't even know how to explain it, but this particular moment, writing this paper, seeing this paper come out, was, it was, how you have aha moments in recovery? This was like an aha moment in my research world, because getting this paper published was so important, because it talked about the value of people with lived experience, right? So I'm just one of four. Every single author on this on this paper has lived experience with the criminal justice system and with addiction. And so, it was just like I say, it was this moment in my life that it just got me thinking that, we really need these perspectives in science. And again, college is definitely the way to do that. The other thing, too, is that, the hope of this paper was that we would reduce stigma, right? So I tell my students in the Collegiate Recovery program at Stanford every day, right? You have a duty. You are in recovery. You have a duty to talk about your lived experiences in the classrooms that you're in every day. If there's a class discussion and you have the opportunity to talk about your lived experience, please, please do so, right? Because if you're not talking about the barriers you have faced early and often in your educational journey, then your peers, the people that aren't in recovery in the classroom around you, will think that addiction doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in their community, so why would they think that it exists when they get out of Stanford and go on to... And so it's so important for individuals, especially college students, to talk about those experiences, to let people know that students live among them. And this is not some... population of students that needs to be stigmatized, right? They're your peers. They're the people that are asking the same questions that you are in the classroom, that with the same eagerness to learn in the classroom. And so for me, Collegiate Recovery Programs has always really, and this research world has always really been about reducing stigma across the campus. Obviously, it's great for students in recovery too, but it's also a tool to reduce stigma, and I think it's a really important tool to reduce stigma as well. And then there are some indirect contributions as well. We, as people in recovery, are uniquely qualified for some certain positions, and when we get the opportunity, it's really a beautiful thing, right? So they decided that they were going to start a substance-free housing unit right in the heart of Greek Row at Stanford University, and I had been on the Collegiate Recovery steering committee the entire time that I had been there. And so when this came to fruition last year, I was the first person that they came to ask. And it wasn't based on the research that I do. It wasn't based on any of my degrees or anything like that. It was based on my experiences in recovery and that I would be a perfect fit for this particular house because 10–20% of the students are in recovery. And so having that kind of leadership by the resident fellows of that house, living in-house with these 51 students, was a quality that they were looking for. And so these indirect benefits or these indirect kinds of contributions to campus culture are really, really important. And I argue that students and people in recovery are, again, uniquely qualified for these exact same kinds of positions. So what's next? What do I see as kind of some of the real world solutions? I'll just talk real quickly about 3 of them. So inclusivity statements, ban the box, and then I'll talk about my friend Robert Ortiz's Silver Scholars, which I love so much. So you're probably not going to change the diversity statement of your university. Those are very, very difficult to change. But if you have a peer recovery group, if you have a peer community or a recovery community center, if you have a collegiate recovery program, you know, this is plastered to the top. This is something that I can't take credit for this. I stole this from the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. When I applied with them, they had this as one of the first things that you saw when you applied there. So we have this above our little conference area that we have for the collegiate recovery program at Stanford. This is so important. We have about 10 students that are formerly incarcerated at Stanford as well, and each one of them have said, like, you know, I obviously I knew that I needed this place because I'm in recovery, but just seeing that I'm accepted, or knowing that I'm accepted, having this you know, poster or whatever it is that you know shows me that my perspective is not just tolerated here, but it's celebrated here, makes a huge difference. So inclusivity statements are always a really great place to start for, and including people that are formerly incarcerated. Ban the box in higher education. Hopefully I don't have to really sell this one. This is the removal of criminal history questions on college applications. This is, you know, one of those areas where the propaganda and the theater of security or public safety really clouds our judgment of what we think, and it's because we've been indoctrinated by the media for a really long time. It's like every time there's any kind of you know, large police activity on a college campus, or anything bad that happens on a college campus, low-hanging fruit is always, criminal history boxes, right? That's something that a school can do, no problem, right? We'll just add a criminal history box and it'll make our campuses safer. That's absolutely not the case. There's been a study in 2007 that shows no difference, absolutely zero, there's no empirical evidence whatsoever to support that statement, that colleges with criminal history boxes are safer than colleges without them. And this is a study done by SUNY, is when the Obama administration came out and said, we ask schools to voluntarily remove the criminal history box from their applications. And it was because of this study. The box itself is discriminatory. So what happened, what they found in this study is that 2/3 of the people in the entire state of New York system, when they applied to colleges, 2/3 with a criminal history got to that question and just didn't go on. They didn't even try. They had heard no so many times associated with that question, whether it's housing or employment or what, they just stopped and didn't go on. But what they also found was that for the ones that did go on, only 10% didn't get in. So there's 50% that didn't even go on and wouldn't even have known if they would have gotten in. They don't even know because they didn't go on. So the question itself on an application is discriminatory. And so that's the reason that this is so important. You can have the question later on. Virginia's a state that did that, right? They moved the question off of the application. You can ask the question later on if you're looking to provide housing, or if you're looking to provide services, or if you're looking to, if you may have concerns. But on the application, if a person has gone through everything that they need to do to get accepted into Virginia Commonwealth University, they should be able to go through the application process without a criminal history box. And again, I'll get off my soapbox, but there's a lot of work to do around this issue. College applications are just one area, right? We still have employment, we still have housing, we still have occupational licensing, but college campuses are really the starting block for me. I mean, the work for Ban the Box in higher education really starts with the higher education piece. And again, I commend the state of Virginia. They were actually, them and Oregon were the most recent states to pass Ban the Box in higher education legislation. They can still ask down the road, but they can't ask they've made it a law that they won't ask on college applications at all in the state of Virginia. I had the great opportunity to work on this legislation back in 2018 when I was still in graduate school, and it was one of the best experiences, 100% in my life. Super fulfilling because I know this work will allow, and this is why I say it's so important, because it's a system level intervention, right? We're going to not just affect one of those injunction points in that buckyball, but this has the opportunity to affect so many points in that buckyball, because we have the opportunity to educate people to get into these positions of power where they can actually change some of those system level locking joints. And so it's really, really important. This is my last slide. This is my friend Robert Ortiz. If anyone doesn't know about underground scholars, I know it's a West Coast thing. It's a California thing. It's cool, man. Underground Scholars was born in 2013 at UC Berkeley by my friend Danny Murillo. And it has expanded all across the state. They do so much really incredible work. They're forerunner, or they just lead the nation in providing services to people that are formerly incarcerated that go on to school. So one of my friends, Robert Ortiz, this was when he was at Cal State Fullerton. He's now a master's student at Cal State Long Beach. So they had a Collegiate Recovery program at Cal State Fullerton. But, he said there was something about his lived experiences as in the criminal justice system and his friends that were in the criminal justice system or had that experience, that he wanted to supplement their already really great lineup of recovery programming. So they had AA, they had NA, they had Smart Recovery, they had each night of the week, they had these different ones, but he wanted to supplement it and create what he calls sober scholars, right? So it's kind of an offshoot of kind of an AA type meeting, and then also for people that are formerly incarcerated, so kind of a spin on the name Underground Scholars. So he called it Sober Scholars. Great program. They've moved it online now, so anyone can chime into it. It's just really cool. And so, you know, this is, if you're looking to kind of meet the needs of people that are formerly incarcerated, and you have a couple of them in your program, and you think this would be neat, you know, this would just be one more meeting that you could add to your repertoire, your arsenal, right? Because that's how I look at it with recovery in general, is you just want to have all these different tools, and so this is just another tool that he has. I think I did all right on time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. And so, yeah, that's my spiel. I hope that you'll take this information, think about collegiate recovery programs as a way of intervening in the criminal justice system.